So now we're going live in a minute. There we go. So now we're live, and good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone. Sorry for the little delay, trying to struggle a little here with the internet, but we're fine now. And thank you for being here, joining us. This event that is calling Community Mapping Online event. We have started our activities since March, actually presenting things and related to this topic. And today we are going to do this presentation of lots of experiences here, people that are being working with communities using these digital tools for mapping. And I'm very glad to be here, join this space, hearing about this experience, and whoever has also discussions to make. We have a program for today that is going to take around 3 hours of activities. So I hope you all stay close to us during this time. To start, we're going to have Professor Monika Kuffer here with us. She is a specialist on this. She's working with remote sensing in slums, and also doing and researches also related to ethics. And we invited her to do this first talk. And just let the floor is yours, Monika. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Patricia, for having me, and very happy to be with you and start sharing my slides. I hope they're now visible. So good afternoon, good morning, bom dia. That's my Portuguese. I'm very happy to be with you. I will go through some of the thoughts and discussions we are having. And this, let's say, my angle, I'm coming from a more technical angle. So I've been working for many years with Earth observation data, satellite images, building models. Nowadays, we're working a lot with very advanced models, with artificial intelligence-based models. But we have with a lot also, and also have not a very, so far, very clear answer on how to appropriately deal with mapping ethics, with privacies. We also have been seeing like this huge, like a quite strong communication gap between the sort of the more technical disciplines and community-based mapping groups. And that's together with a lot of colleagues which are now in this call. We are trying to sort of cross this gap and bridge this gap, and bringing, let's say, the more technical disciplines together with this very sophisticated ground knowledge, which is within the group of community mappers. You see my name there, and you see also the name of PhD I'm working with, Isaac, and a lot of also what is part of this presentation is coming from the development of his PhD topic, which is really looking into the ethical questions of Earth observation-based mapping. And I just give you some small taste of what is our debate and our discussion. And I'm really looking forward to get some feedback from this team of community mappers which are within the presentation. So what you see is, it's a beautiful view on the Earth, on the nightlight scene, but what you see, there's a massive amount of Earth observation data available. You just have to think about all the data taken of the place you're living. There's a constant flow of information which is put into global repositories on data. They are fed into models. Models, for example, like we have a model here of the city of Khartoum in Sudan. On the right, you see a urban, like a growth modelation, a visualization of how the city has been growing, which is using Earth observation data, which helps us to understand aspects of dynamics, also how cities are growing. We also can see on the right a more high resolution image, and you see a red area, which is typical, like in the regional context, the process of the conflict of Sudan and a lot of the internally displaced camps which have been growing in the surrounding of Khartoum. And what you see also from another aspect of Earth observation data, from a nightlight image, that these areas are having, for example, issues of access to infrastructure. So you can produce a lot of information from Earth observation-based data, but of course from a very top-down vision. There's also a lot of work done, and I will take also to show you the dilemma also of Earth observation-based data and why we think we really need to interact with communities to build models which are validated on the ground. So that's an example of a predictive aid, going to the predictive impact assessment, which is, I think, a great idea to say. The thought is, can we train models which are fed with a lot of data, also Earth observation data, various levels of data, to understand where we can expect a disaster happening, and can we be proactive in terms of, for example, providing assistance to people living on the ground before the disaster, before like a flood hits the place. But the question is, so what type of data and what is the implication of the data which are fed into models to include, but also to exclude a certain population? And that's what I will focus mainly of this short talk. That's a fairly complicated model. I don't want to let you understand the full model, but it's a typical model of defining risk of like an area being impacted by a certain hazard. Let's say it's a flood. What I want to highlight here on this model is what is part of this equation is the element of risk. And an important aspect of the element at risk are the people, the population living at a certain place, which are important to know. So how many people are living at a certain spot? How many structures are there? Many of these risk models also go via monetary value, that they estimate possible loss, which is, of course, again, also disadvantaging poor communities because they are maybe not sufficiently mapped. They're underrepresented in terms of number of building counts. They're also not well understood in the amount of loss the community has, because it's often done in a very monetarian-driven equation. So that's a lot of the problems of the present risk models. Going to an example of an Indian city, and that visualize also the dilemma and the question of what type of data are used to feed in such models. So maybe a bit of a complex story, but it shows that large parts of the slums, the slum communities, are not officially recognized and often not being used for any kind of reporting. For also, if you use such official data, they will also sort of exclude people from, for example, in case of a hazard happening, from compensation schemes, simply not being visible. In this case, one of the reasons why they're not visible is that you see also very high temporal dynamics in these communities. An example, because they're very temporal settlements, and so there's a lot of very high temporal dynamics which are often not captured, and often data are very dated. But this dated data are used and have certain implications for the example now taken of risk models. The good thing is, and that's the sort of the advantage of Earth observation data, that there's a continuous observation of our Earth surface. You just have to imagine that there's a continuous flow of satellite-based information generated over your house on a daily basis. Your house is crossed by different satellites, and that's only an example of one type of satellite which crosses over your house. Then the question is also that data have, of course, this Earth observation data come with different level of details and a different level of costs. So on the right, you see an example of a quite coarse resolution, but it's free of charge. So often models are using this free of charge data. While the high resolution data, they come with quite high costs. So you can say about an image data cost of this source is about $20 US per square kilometer. So if you take a city of 1,000 square kilometer and you multiply it by 20, then you have really high image cost to cover only one city. And then is the question of if you look into the very high, ultra high resolution data, which is the example of UAV images, drone images, then also the question of what should be actually shown on the scene, where you actually invade privacy spaces. And there are, of course, a lot of regulations are coming into place, who is allowed to fly drone images, etc. So in the whole conversation about why we need to connect community-based mapping with Earth observation-based data, we see on, and I put some brainstorming together, which we are doing. So we see an important aspect, and I will also show some example of this aspect in a minute, that we see there's a potential negative impact of if models are biased, like, for example, if populations are not covered at all or totally undercovered, people are not accounted for, they won't receive, like in the case of a hazard happening, not any compensation, they are not part of any rapid aid campaigns, etc. There's also the question of that we need really to engage on what level of detail and what choices, how should the mapping be done, what should be included in map. Also the validation of maps is a big and an important question. We see this huge, what we call like the communication gap, gaps of really understanding this often very sophisticated technical modeled information. That information need to be well documented and communicated. Also the question about classification, so who's controlling what classes to be used, what is also the definition of classes. As an example, where you have this binary maps, slum, non-slums. So who is deciding when it's an area a slum and when it is not a slum? Where do we draw the boundary? And then, of course, another aspect is often the mapping is done in a very, what I call an exclusive manner. We map, for example, the poor communities, but we don't map, either they are only highlighted or they're totally excluded. But we don't map the urban surface as a continuous space where you have variation of degrees of poverty, of degrees of deprivation, where you also have this, show also the dynamic of communities maybe transiting to being less deprived. And then, of course, the question that we should also need to map not only what is absence, but also what are the assets, and that has also to the whole debate about who is making the choices, what to be mapped, what to be classified. So from this abstract debate of conceptual debate, some examples, and that's like starting with an example of a survey we recently did of understanding of what problems users of data on deprived areas, so spatial data, maps of deprived communities, what people encountered as the biggest problems, and what you see as the principle, the top 3 problems is the lack in access to data, and also the uncertainty in existing data products. Uncertainty is also referring also to how accurate are they, also how up to date are the data, and often not being well documented. And that's going now to the example, and that's what I want to really highlight, is the potential bias. And a model output is typically only as good as the model input. And we need to better understand also what are the potential uncertainties, limitations of models. It's an example of a new data set by Microsoft Bing, which has been emerging for 2 countries in Africa. It started with the US and Canada. It's now available for Uganda and Tanzania, and it maps all the building footprints using Earth observation data and artificial intelligence-based algorithms. And it seems to be great, a really fascinating new data source. In the US and America, this data are also very good and also highly accurate and used in models. But when you look into a typical urban scene, and that's an example of the city of Kampala in Uganda, then what you see that this data are systematically massively underrepresenting the more densely built up urban areas, and therefore not accounting for the high population density, the high build-up density, and totally omitting large parts of the more deprived urban spaces. And that's data what you can see in all, this problem you see in all types of urban models and urban spatial data sets like OpenStreetMap data. They're often not well covered in new data sets like the Maxa building count. Also, the very high density areas are very much underrepresented. And often what you see that data only covering a small percentage of the buildings, and this data often feed it into global population models, and ending up that in some areas the population is sometimes only covered by 10% of the real population, at least the population which is accounted by local communities living in these spaces. We are trying also to see how we can better fit models to capture the more complex urban spaces. That's some ongoing work we are doing, which hopefully could feed and help to improve such models in future. Another aspect also to think about, a lot of the focus and modeling focus is very much focusing on the primary, the larger urbanizations, while particularly secondary cities, where you see actually the majority of the urban growth are happening, also a high level of inequalities. They're typically very poorly covered in all spatial data sets. And that calls in principle for the importance to have to improve access to data, but also to have Earth observation models combined with community-based data, because data are really required, but we need data which are validated, which are reflecting the on-ground reality. And such data sets are used for many examples, like I just showed here, for example, previously about disaster response, but for many aspects on urban health, on service provision, also links to models on climate change and the impact of climate change in the coming years. Base data are urgently required, and also understanding environmental impact of areas. A big question is, so how should we classify, and how should we go about classifying urban spaces, like in this case showing on the right, a more classical way of labeling and classifying an area being either planned or unplanned, or you could call it also slum, non-slum, where you always have the problem of the boundary. So where you draw the boundary, how can we agree that this boundary is actually the boundary which reflects on-ground realities? Also the question on what are the implications any model comes with an error and a certain accuracy. Good models maybe have plus 90% accuracy, but still it means 10% are not correct. So what are the potential implications? We need to much better communicate also which locations are actually ground validated in such data sets, which is typically not done. It's only given an overall accuracy. We don't know where are actually the problems happening in the model. On the right, you see some ongoing work we are doing together with the whole team, also linked to IDEAMAPS and slum maps on producing a city-level deprivation models, which is not having this binary slum, non-slum vision, but really trying to see it as a gradual phenomena and mapping all spaces, including at least the built-up spaces. And bringing this to the question of how to improve maps and how to respond to privacy questions in the mapping process, where we basically concluded that in particular the drawing of exact boundaries and the question how you should draw the boundary is bringing huge issues. So are you inside the boundary? Are you outside the boundary? What are the implications of being inside a slum boundary? What are the implications maybe if you are outside the slum boundary and not receiving any improvement or any kind of aid? Are you stigmatized or is that your house is drawn inside the boundary? And therefore we are promoting very much the middle approach, which are gridded slum probabilities or gridded deprivation probabilities, which is not having this either or phenomena, but showing a specific, under specific conditions like physical deprivation, the aspect which area are more or less deprived. We very much advocate for the point of being combining the Earth observation and space observation with information from the ground in terms of validating, but also in terms of designing and defining how the mapping should be done, what should be included on maps, what are the most urgent questions to be shown and included, and to also get an understanding how valid are the mapping outputs. And two final slides, that's on work of a colleague from Spain. And this has been emerging also in the discussion of COVID, that we are trying really to purpose Earth observation methods to what we've got as a response from local communities, what is actually reflecting their present needs, like in the case of the increase of waste piles, which is a general problem which has been increasing, particularly during COVID conditions, and that we really produce maps which are reflecting specific needs from the ground. And my final example is on combining this kind of very quantitative models with more qualitative data, like this voices, the stories coming from communities, which can be combined in spatial data models to enrich and really understanding the local context of the complexity of urban spaces. So to be quick and short, some final thoughts. I think we need really to combine community-based data with Earth observation-based data, and both have their strengths, but also particularly the combination really makes us understanding processes, but also the complexity of urban spaces. We need very much to what I call democratize the access to data, because often data is only available within research labs. It's produced in a way that's not accessible, nor understandable, nor easily communicatable to local communities. We need to document, we need to make data and data outputs, information understandable. and we need to sort of be the carrier and supporting of fair data exchange. Thanks a lot for having me, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Monika, for your presentation. I was wondering if we can, if you join us to the end of the webinar, right? Are you being with us? Okay, so because of some technical problems that we have, I'm going to go for the next section, and then we have a discussion opportunity, and then everyone can send their questions during the following presentations, also directed to Monika. Is that will be okay? Good. Thank you. And I apologize also for all the technical problems with the transmission in Portuguese, and but I think it's all settled now. You can post your questions about Monika's presentation or the following presentations on YouTube or here at Zoom, so we'll be able to present these questions for the presenters, okay? And our next presentation is Tasauf Bilah, and he's from Bangladesh. Tasauf, can you share your screen and you're here with us, so I can see you're here. Everyone can see you.
Thank you, Patricia.
There you go. Thank you. So yeah, Tasauf is going to present in English, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and just to give a short presentation, Tasauf is currently the monitoring and coordination lead at Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab and the director of the OSM+Mapillary Bangladesh Foundation. He began his career as a computer engineer and started working in the humanitarian field over 5 years ago. Besides working with Medicine Sans Frontiers in the past, he has also been an active part of the humanitarian movement by volunteering with UN volunteers, HOT, SBTF, and Crisis Map and Mapillary. So Tasauf, thank you so much for being here. I know it's been a hard time as COVID got there, right? So it's a great sport, and so we really appreciate you being here with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, for having me over here. It has been a hard time as I've been tested COVID positive and have been suffering from that. Right now, sort of recovering. As it is a very last minute preparation for me, I will have a very short slides on what's happening in Bangladesh, and later on most of the talking will be done without the presentation itself. So without further adding things up, I'm just gonna share my screen right now. Can you see my screen? Yeah, thank you. When I'm gonna talk about the community mapping in Bangladesh, it's more or less like first I can share the history of how community mapping through OSM got into Bangladesh, and how we have been going through the different phases till now. Actually, OSM has been introduced in Bangladesh in 2011, actually with a OSM club in Bangladesh University of Engineering Technology out here. Of course, with support, some sort of support from HOT and other OSMF itself. It was a very small scale initiative initially, But later on, we have seen some sort of thrive coming in when World Bank, actually GFDRR project came out here, and another, I would say, one of our mentors out here in OSM and pioneer in OSM, Mr. Hassanul Haq, took charge and tried to train people out there, especially with the NGOs and other agencies out here in Bangladesh. We have seen a lot of trainings happening, and people are doing mapathons and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it was more like capacity development was happening, but not much contribution. Contribution-wise, it was not that much fruitful. The main thrive that happened, it was more like in 2015's January, when Missing Maps piloted the first project of theirs in Dhaka city. It was in mapping one of the slum areas that MSF has been providing support in. That was Hazaribagh and Kamrangishore. We were mapping out the tannery areas and the small-scale industries that were operated out there. And at the same time, we were mapping out the overall areas for better visibility in map, especially in OSM. So later on, from 2015, we have seen the community started growing up voluntarily, people getting involved in the process, and so in that process, we have seen some slum mappings, couple of slum mappings happening with American Red Cross having one project out there in Dhaka city, and Save the Children International also having another one. But all these projects, what was happening when the projects were there, people were getting involved because people are seeing that something is happening. But when the project was not there, most of the cases, people are not contributing anymore, and the contributions, those are coming from the projects. It was the only thing that was happening, and overall contribution level was still low. We have seen the changes coming in when in 2016, in early 2016, I would rather say. An initiative derived from the community itself came out. A team was formed of the local mappers out there. The initiative was called the Booth, Team Booth. Actually, it's a funny thing that it was Bangladesh Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Operations Team, but the Booth actually, in English, Booth means the ghosts. So the main the people in the team, they decided to be behind the curtain and do the changes that need to be happen out there. And later on, we have seen a huge contribution, a spike in contribution in terms of both in locally and also globally. I will give you some glimpse of what happened after that. And in 2018, we have seen the community started feeling like they should have some sort of entity that can registered entity, I would rather say, that can support the projects and also take their own initiatives as projects to run out there, and also advocate OSM, open source mapping and all participatory mapping. Not only, I would rather say.
Hey,
sorry.
I think Monika has her mic open. I think it's okay. Go ahead.
So what happened out there? They started building up their own projects out here and tried the advocacy for OSM, open source technologies, and open data ecosystem has been there since then. And also another part is BOIL initiative that derived from the community itself, though it's more a for-profit organization, but more focusing on how these, I would say, the potential people in mapping and also in open data ecosystem can contribute, and at the same time can have sort of I would say volunteers can also have a transition to their career paths. So this is all community-led initiatives that has been evolving around OSM, open data, and open technology that we can say. So this is one statistics I love to share. I would rather say in each and everywhere I want to talk about Bangladesh in OSM. This is a leaderboard from Missing Maps. So a Missing Maps leaderboard, when we see the humanitarian contribution, how much humanitarian map contribution has been happening from Bangladesh, most of the people doesn't even know that the top contributors in that leaderboard out there, I have marked them out there. From the top 10, you can see 7 are from Bangladesh, and we have. I was tracking down the charts out there and found out that almost 1/4 of the top 100 is from Bangladesh. So people, the volunteers and mappers from Bangladesh has been, the community from Bangladesh has been contributing huge load of contribution in terms of humanitarian mapping itself, supporting HOT initiative and also Missing Maps initiatives out there. So this is one thing. Another part, when this is a comparison, I would rather say the changes. It might clarify how when the community started to thrive, how the contribution level changed out there. You can say after 2015, there has been a huge load of contribution that has been made in terms of the coverage of Bangladesh. We have covered recently. I was tracking down how much coverage we have in terms of the base map coverage in Bangladesh when I was having another project out there, and I found out the OSM guys over here already covered more than 30% of the whole Bangladesh itself. And there are some other stats I will explain a very short way, because you have seen, as I was mentioning, that from 2015 how the change is happening, and from 2016 this is one landmark I was talking about, when a team out there from a community, a team is performing, not only the individuals. When individual mapping is being done, most of the cases what happens when in communities we have seen people from different areas, individuals are contributing individually. But this is the change we can have if we can have a good coordinated team out there from the community volunteering for a cause. You can see from 2016, all the contribution in terms of the buildings, highways, rivers, and amenities, whatever you say, everything went high. From the flattened curve, it has a spike out there. So team-wise contribution from the communities can make a huge change. This is one thing I would like to mention, and later on I would like to see more and more teams coming in. Teams are performing in global context. Most of the cases in global context, we have seen more organizational contribution is happening, and at the same time, individuals are contributing. But I haven't seen that much team performing in global context too. As I have been sort of closely associated with HOT itself. I have been in the HOT board in last term of board of directors. I have to resign because of my job-related issues. Anyways, this is how changes can happen, and Bangladesh can be a model if people think that how teams from the communities can contribute. And as I was mentioning, in terms of the team booth, I was mentioning the team-wise performance. If you can see, I was trying to find out the missing maps contribution, global volunteers to missing maps, the contribution and how much booth team has contributed in last 5 years. It is almost 15% of the whole contribution that has been done throughout the missing maps history out there. So this is huge. This is huge, and people are contributing in a big way. This is how team can make the change. So I would rather stop sharing my screen. Now I would like to sort of address some challenges that we have faced in terms of community mapping out there. That was more of a statistical data set. I won't take that much time more. One thing that Monika was mentioning out there about the slum mapping. We have been extensively involved in different projects with slum mapping projects out there, including recent one in 2017 with Warwick University supported project out there. So what happened out there, most of the cases, people should have some sort of consent out there, whether slums should have been mapped or not. This is where open data and open mapping, creating some sort of, I would say, colonialism, because people's the consent of the local people, whether they want their areas or their houses to be mapped or not, that should have been their own choice. When we are mapping out slums, we have to, I would say, we have to think one thing first. Most of the cases, slums are not legal households or residential areas. Most of the cases, those lands are sort of illegally occupied. So mapping the slums and opening those data might create some sort of problems. This is one experience I would like to share, because whenever we have tried to map the slum areas, we have found out people are afraid of being mapped, and people are not ready to be mapped. In some extent, they're very much afraid, as their households out there and livelihoods out there having some sort of illegality out there, or I would say mentioned as illegals. And some people also have shown concern to us that having those areas being mapped might end up in some other people, rich people out there. Not only the government might destroy the slums eventually, or there are some peoples out there, rich people out there who might start planning on housing projects and having their livelihoods and those shelters being destroyed out there. So all those things are coming up whenever we have been trying to map the slums and things like that. And in those cases, what we have seen, the organizations, when organizational approaches are being made to map the slums out there, most of the cases organizations are using their own contacts within the community, slum community itself, to have those maps, and without being clarifying why those maps are being created for those slums. So this is one thing. This is how open data itself is creating another issue out there, another question, raising another question, whether these consents are being taken, whether those population want to be mapped or not. So this is a question that has been repeatedly asked within our community too. So I would like to hear more discussions coming in the global ecosystem. So more people are getting concerned and raising voices about how we can mitigate those issues out there. This is one thing. And
sorry to so much, just concerned about the time, but
yeah,
just give your final thoughts. It's fine.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Thank you. This is all.
Sorry, I'm doing the hard job here, trying to make, cut off stuff that speaks really interesting. I think you pointed very important questions. I hope everyone is wanting to contribute in the discussion, giving their thoughts on that, because it's something definitely that concerns whoever is working with mapping communities. So lots of different points you pointed here. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And sorry for interrupting you. Okay, so you'll be able to be here with us, and whoever has questions for yourself, just okay. Thank you, Tasauf. So our next presenter, is going to speak in Portuguese. So I will ask you a little time for our translators to move of rooms, but whoever is here in the main room can move. Click here at Zoom to the language button and switch for English. So you listen. Raquel is going to translate for us from Portuguese to English.
Good morning.
Okay, but whoever is in the YouTube, you'll be able probably to be hearing already in English, so you'll be fine. And so thank you very much. And I also would like to thank Raquel, Paula, they are translating for us. Thank you so much for being here. This is very important. We have this language barrier when we talk about community and interacting and making this happen, having a further experience. So this was something that the group thought that was very important to have here. So thank you so much for helping us with that. And also thank everyone from ITC, and for Warwick and Dana that is here. So it's too much to thank, but with no longer, I'd like to introduce Alexandres Mota. Alexandres is a bright young leader at the community of Alto do Cabrito, Brazil. That has started as an undergrad student, joining the Youth Innovators project, a extension and research project led by the local association of EMBA and the Public Health Institute of Federal University of Bahia. Alexandres also experienced the process of building his knowledge about the neighborhood and his city through maps and his great performance as a researcher and leader led him to his friends to launch the social startup called Comunitech, among other achievements. So we're very proud of Alexandre for being here representing the communities in Brazil. And Alexandre, go ahead. Pode começar.
Muito bom dia, gente.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alexandre, and I am going to present here the project Young Innovators. And I'm not going to say it's a product, but it's something that was born from the project Young Innovators. Next slide.
Bom, esse aí é apenas pequeno registro da história do projeto.
This is just a few images about the project, where we started at the Federal University of Bahia, and we had citizenship interventions projects with other young people in the community. As you can see in the second picture, we organized theories and concepts utilized by Milton Santos, the geographer, Afro-Brazilian geographer. And we also had topography projects, and we had 172 participants in 2018, and we have participated in the training at IDEAMAPS.
Para mapear a campo junto com um jovem da universidade, um agente de controle de zoonoses e um morador. Nós íamos a campo fazer essa coleta de dados, entender o ambiente e voltávamos para a universidade para poder elaborar o nosso web mapa.
It's for control, and we went to do field work. This is the third picture in which we talk about the data that was collected in the system. Next. During the project, during the process of collecting data, we were able to elaborate a map in which we had several points of areas that we considered risk areas, channels, infrastructure problems. All of that was set up, organized in a catalog, and you can see in this first arrow a white dot. That is trash, surrounded by a green area, and this trash comes from only one street that in which there's no selective trash collection, and there's no box for collecting. So this small trash dot is responsible for a number of problems in the street itself. And as you can see in the second picture, we have the three of us are in a soccer field where people utilize for playing sports next to this trash accumulation, and the exposures to the problems is very high, and this whole problem is unfolded in the community itself, because this trash then attracts rodents, insects, and diseases such as dengue and other issues that are caused by this trash accumulation. And as I had previously stated, the project, we had started the mapping utilizing tables. Next slide. And along this project process, it was necessary to have to elaborate a creative idea, which is elaborating an app that would allow for this mapping and utilized by the community so that they could denounce these issues. The first health fair in which we brought Professor Isa, Giovanni, Romero Nazaré, and Murilo Guerreiro. They presented this app, and they also crafted in collaborative forms the avatars for the young people in the project and those who belong to this project. All of them had participation in the elaboration of this project. They had avatars and personalized avatars so that this app could be developed in the most collaborative ways possible, not only in order to deal with data, but also for residents to present their issues. Potable water, issues with potable water, the presence of stagnant water that may generate dengue, that also is issues that could be mapped. And we provided also the phone numbers for those people or those institutes, organizations that could help address that issue. The problem was described, it was mapped, and also then they could have access to the institutions that could provide them support. So that helped in mapping the problems. And next slide, the problems that would be mapped. And community tech, talking about mapping and technology, it's formed by, it's a social startup. And young people who were part of this project, me, Alexandre Mota, Rodrigo, who also lives in my neighborhood, Alto do Cabrito, Mateus and Jamerson. We are part of the informal areas of the city. This map that shows the red dots, the red area, it's a map about community, wealth distribution, income distribution. We come from this informal area of the city. Next slide. And in this settlement, we face a number of issues related to technology. As you can see here, the city is divided. Part of the city, that's where technologies are available and they work. And then there's this area where everything is moving slowly and delayed. I'm talking about the technologies. For whom are these technologies designed? For whom are these technologies at work? Are we just doing it right, or are we just consuming these products that oftentimes were not projected in order to address our issues? It is not a critique, but let's talk about a problem when we mention issues of technology and mapping spaces of inequality. We realize that it's not something that is designed to address problems. Unfortunately, technology has become a capitalist product that is not designed to genuinely address the problems that are faced by neighborhoods. These apps, for example, had no accessibility in the communities. Drivers could not go into certain neighborhoods in light of issues of infrastructure as much as these food delivery apps. They were afraid of going into these neighborhoods because they were afraid of being mugged and other concerns of that nature. So what could we do? What did we do? It was necessary to include the neighbors themselves, the residents themselves, in having access to these technologies, and not only to connect them, but to generate income. And then now we have more integration with this technology. We even have ideas that emerge in order to embrace these people who are in these situations, such as the app called Tras Favela, developed by Tiago, that provides us with a very good, it's a very good notion, a very good idea, providing people who live in the neighborhood themselves in generating income and having access to these technologies. I know where I live, I know where I can and cannot walk in these neighborhoods, and that makes life easier in implementing technology in these places. Next slide. And some of the goals are understanding these inequalities, these spatial inequalities and exclusion of vulnerable communities, organizing mobilization and participative mapping, and we promote inclusion interventions, citizenship technologies, art, culture, sport, health, and citizenship, all of that within the community, but also within the project Young Innovators. Then we evaluate these interventions and we influence public policies geared towards reducing inequalities. Next slide. Because we are living the 4.0 revolution, and it's no longer just necessary, it's mandatory. People need to be connected, otherwise the world will be advancing and we are going to become obsolete. So we have here gathered up with some secretariats in the city, Seman, Leval, Desal, taking all this data that we have collected and organized efforts geared towards public policies. Next slide, in which we elaborated a project where we were able to present a legislation that was geared towards addressing people in marginalized, racialized communities, Black women and Black men, so that they could be included in the promotion of innovation. Next slide. We realized that our young people were facing challenges because they had no training, professional training, or training in technology. Young people, Black young people, won't have access to this training. We did some research. It costs $100 to have the access to this training. We don't have that money in impoverished communities. So then we provide them with this training. If we talk about the Revolution 4.0, who is earning or advancing with this technological advancements? How is this technology community presented to our communities? Because internet and IT has to do with bringing people into a group, because technologies are supposed to serve to gather our people, because people are isolated in their bubbles and they don't have any idea of what's going on in these different spaces. People don't understand what is automatization and in artificial intelligence. So these advances is something that is now being brought to the community is the QR code. But we know that this has been around for years. I have an example. Just imagine when cities, the formal cities, is the older brother, and the clothes that were worn by the older brother are then passed along to the younger brother. So then the informal cities then receive the technology that is already outdated and obsolete. So we had this false sensation that we are being included, but we are consuming actually obsolete technology while we are just using these technologies to be in social media, but we could be utilizing it for much more. so that you can have training. You have to, but how can we have the access to this training? Next slide. And here we have our first classes taught in the community. First, we only had one student, but once we started doing our advertising, we had then community, we had children, and we were sponsored by Young Innovators Project, Fiotech, next slide, and the training of these instructors were continuous training, English training, particularly now during the pandemics where young people are in their homes, they could not gather up in order to have English classes. We created a WhatsApp group where we exchange content and classes. Next slide. And then the projects, then we went to Polytechnica in order to have some mapping projects, and then training and environmental evaluation, where we had the process of related to mapping health issues and diseases. And that is the training that we had provided to the community in order to provide the continuity. Next slide. So that they themselves can continue this work in order to improve the situation, their situation in society. And the next registers are some, next slide, are some articles, next slide please, where we present and mobilize the public policies geared towards the community. That had it was a lecture that we organized at Campo da Pólvora, where we presented our project, and young people feel valued as they belong to this project. And this last message, we had that moment where we were gathered up at Campo da Pólvora, where we presented to 400 people. It was a great opportunity, a great experience.
A hora, o tempo, desculpa, Alexandre.
Patricia is saying that now we are running out of time.
Pode fechar, pode concluir.
Perfeito.
Please, but you may wrap up. And these are some of our lectures and interventions, and we went to the Bradesco Foundation, and the importance of this project in the community, of all of this mapping events. Thank you for sharing the slides. So as much as we live in our own neighborhoods, the fact that we are in the field and we have more sensibility to the issues that are present in our community is very strong, because as a resident, I thought I knew my neighborhood, but when I was in the field and I saw the issues in my own neighborhood and the consequences of that problem, we start to actually feel outraged by the community conditions. So mapping and demanding from responsible institutions is of utmost importance. And I would like to share here my social media addresses, and thank you for allowing me to share my experiences in this process, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
So much, Alexandre. It's a very, very interesting project. That's a lot to say about it. I know we probably, another thing is that we realized during these 2 months asking people to participate on these events, that we are not going to be able to make and hear everything that we want in this short time. So this is just a pinch of everything, and we want to start and promote some sort of platform where we can put all these experience together and have other people being able to learn from each other, right? So yeah, that's something that we're going to be able to discuss later. But thank you so much, Alexandre, for being here. It was a very nice presentation. So we are going to have our next presenter, which is Luis Miguel Sánchez. If you're here, you can open your video and audio. Thank you, Luis, for being here with us. Luis Miguel is a volunteer in humanitarian and citizen science initiatives, co-founder of the Solidarity Economy Organization, a manager of social projects, WeTheHumans.org, humanitarian mapper of the OpenStreetMap community in Colombia, participant of Citizens Initiative Brigada Digital Colombiana, and the collective network Bogotá, focused on community-based wireless networks. Luis, it's a pleasure to have you here sharing your experience with us. Luis is going to speak in English or Spanish?
In Spanish.
Okay,
there's
so
community people listening. I would like to make records in Spanish. Thank you.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I would just ask our translators to change channels so we make sure that everyone can understand what you're saying.
And Luis should switch himself into the Spanish channel.
And
yeah, whoever is in the Spanish channel can keep there, and if you want to just switch for the English channel. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patricia.
Muchas gracias.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share the link of this presentation so I can continue. And I hope you can see my slide, my screen, and can you hear me well?
Listo, muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you. We are going to talk about an experience of community mapping in Colombia that was created from an implementation project of strategy. I can't hear him. I don't know if it's my internet or I can't hear you. And this community mapping 5 regions of Colombia, this project to had. I'm going to give you some information. It came from a proposal, the university initiative programs for the peace and living together. This is the team of work. These are the colleagues that work with us, the professors and the colleagues. This, I have to thank all IATA's organizations and these communities. His sound is not good. Organizations, the university, and these capacities are complementary. So these are the institutions that are participating. We start in the end of 2017, and we are going to talk a little bit about the communities the project, what we have done, what lessons we have learned, what the best practices, and what we propose and what we are doing. Entonces, particularly in the communities that have ended, the 5 communities that this project has worked, 2 are in the south of the country and 3 in the north of Colombia. In the first case, is una rural reserve that is in 4 municipalities of Caquetá in Colombia, in an Amazonian area. Both are colonization areas and affected by armed conflicts, and are in areas that are environmental protected. And this Macarena is also an area of strategic management. Yeah, also we have peasants communities that are for many years settled there, but then there are problems that are brought by the affected by the armed groups. His sound is not good. Here in the north, in the Córdoba department, areas húmedas, humid areas, I'm sorry, humid areas, and these other areas close to the beach of Cartagena. In these 2 places, there are peasants' occupations in flooded areas. And these people are expecting for the land reform, but these areas should be protected because they are environmental protected area, but these populations are waiting, and they should be seeing how to do the management of this protected land. Another case is here in the border with Venezuela. This is also a protected area as one area in conflict, inter-ethnic conflict for the permanence of the territories. And we have, since the 80s, mineration projects that had settled in the areas illegally too. The main objective is to contribute for the transformation of the conflicts through the use of tools, analytical tools for evaluate, and we try to do and to create local observatories, either create observatory or strengthening them. And the difficulty is an external actor that comes to work in this zone, and the idea is that local people can continue with the process. So we have a process of training, research, and a follow-up. Entonces, the training, we did workshops and etc. In the research, we start with dialogue with the communities, analysis of the area, processing, and we had to do the feedback and validation and the follow-up for the management of these conflicts of the territories. What is the role of the community map in these communities? we entonces we believe that all the people can make use of the geographic thought. Isso are some references that we took in consideration and starting points. La open science, first, a do not harm approach. And we wanted the most broad participation of all the stakeholders. And this is our idea of justice, you know, and the use of the science and the citizen for the science and the intelligence also to make it more productive. And reflection and research to action or intervention in the area, how the communities can defend their territories of different kinds of threatenings that they have through the management of the science and the importance of legitimacy of the community sources, because university historically has a problem with that, we know. Also based in open standards, open source software, and autonomy and decentralization. Because when the project is ended, we wanted that this technological solutions stay with the community and they manage this. I'm trying to accelerate a little bit. It is in English, you can see. Here, this depends on and from our experience. As the point of view of the institution and the organization, the history and the previous needs of the community needs to be mapeados, it needs to be mapped, and we have to incorporate this work of mapping. So this has to be autonomous processes of the community work related to the mapping, and we have to have a certain degree of participation. People cannot use different kinds of tools. We have to include everything. What we desire and we work, this is a participative system, relevation, adoption, publication, and implementation. And we made this question, how in this reflection, I want to show a little video that is related to the experience of mapping in the communities. So a few seconds so you can observe what is the work that we try to do starting from the research. I don't think we do 100%, but we try to have. We are working a social cartography, and people are discussing how first locate themselves in the map. There are many reflections behind this because we have started, but we lack documentation. For example, I would like to say of the participation of the women of this project, we can say that we have to deal with the gender and make it more female participation, how this can be useful. And the use of the publication, we have to make a platform to make it use. I have two videos of people that are in the community. We had these two cases. This is a characterization using COBOL. So the university brought this tool to work with the community. So we try to do this cross-sectional project, and we all got an approach to this project. So the second case, his audio is cutting. And the work of the historical presence in the community. Ciénaga is in process of demarcation, and so the community knowledge made it the recognition of the polygon that I want to present the videos of the community people. This is Marta. There's a problem with the audio, but I'm going to tell what she's saying. She's Marta Cristina Foreiro. She's the president of a community group of indigenous people in the municipality of La Paz.
We can't hear the audio of the video.
I cannot hear the audio of the video, but he was saying that he is saying what she is saying. So he first introduced herself, what she does, but now we cannot hear anything now. Not him and not the audio of the video. Not the video and not Luis. They live. They think that peasants should not be in certain areas because these areas are ellos tienen difficulties and conflicts of the territory because they are living this wilderness like in these moors areas because they are peasants and they shouldn't be living in that area. Only the indigenous population of that area, but there were mining in this area as well, he mentioned. Sorry, let's try to see the next, he's saying. I can hear you. Given the time, if you can conclude, forgive me. So I'm concluding. He is one of the people who has sent us a video of Barrosinos. He's sharing his experience. We can see these videos later. And he says that his work has been very, very hard. Although they have rebuilt certain areas with a certain infrastructure with their own means, the state, the government does not take that in consideration. This was some of the best practice mapping with OSM, with our own work, with the technical work. We had a participative group and we work with the methodology and we work also with real workshops, and this has facilitated for this group to be able to give back the work in a systematic way to and lessons learned, the community mapping. His audio is cutting, but you can read there. We were not able to get a common, could not reach a total agreement. Not everybody was convinced of the potential of this tool. So we have needed to work with all this institutional, community, and social organization, all these sectors, for them to understand the need and the validation of this tool. These are the projections we have for these areas that I mentioned. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Gracias, Luis, for your presentation.
Thank you, Luis, for your presentation.
Have questions for later? I'll just move on for our, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very interesting project and experiences. But we're going to our next presenter, Rafael Muñoz. Rafael, you can join us with your camera and audio now. Rafael? There we go. So, yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi. Rafael, you're speaking in Spanish, right?
Listo.
Sin
Entonces,
problemas.
listo.
Okay, he's going to present in Spanish.
Listo. Creo que ya está.
I believe is here already.
Listo. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning. I'm Rafael Muñoz. I want to share my experience and the experience in Munich and Bogota. What are the differences and what are best practices to be transferred? The idea is to present a little bit of what we are doing and how why to map, what is the difficulties we find, how we map in Munich and how we map it in Bogota, what's learning and challenges we found. A little bit about us. I'm part of the research group. It's called Research and Urban Structure and Transportation. We work with the students and PhD students to discuss this urban structure and transport planning. So how we can move in the cities by walking or bikes, and how we have a planning tool. This goat is based in the data from OSM that evaluate the accessibility. In this, each part of this map represents how easy it is to find schools, universities, stores, all that we need in our daily life. Walking, the greener is more possibility of walking and bike, and the redder is less accessible. These tools can be transferable in different parts of the world. Here we have 3 cities. We have Bogota, the right to the top, Fürstenfeld, and Munich in the bottom right. And the last thing, these are parts of the projects in Munich, and in Bogota I did as my master's program. Why we need to map? It's not the same to walk. Entonces, in many parts, we don't have the links for pedestrians. It's not the same. Here in the image, here be that the pedestrians connection is different from the cars connections. We also have the needs to map points of commerce and parks in areas of interest to complement accessibility and the properties of the streets, if they have ramps, if they are, how wide they are, if they have lights. So the more information we have, even the relief, it talks best about the accessibilities. What time they open, what time they close. And we can do models that are different to the different conditions of mobilities. If they have ramps, for example, people who use a wheelchair can use, but if there's no ramp, wheelchair users cannot use that. What mechanisms of contribution we use? We have events in the universities where the students can participate, and they are rewarded if they participate. We have also financed mapping with research-based, project-based in platforms, and we are assistants to collect data in the field. There's also mapping for university works, and for example, in our thesis of undergrad or graduation, we also have from an app. This is a little bit of our experience. First, we have Munich. Munich we use first with Mapillary, and for the research project, and we were with our bikes, we installed Mapillary, and we biked through all the streets to collect the images and the sequence. Later, this gallery of images were integrated to the platform, and people can see the images as part of the app, and was also used to complement the maps. The mapping party we do presentially, but due to the COVID, we had to do for Zoom. They are usually students, but also people from the communities, and also in some cases, mappers who want to get involved in the project. In this case, we have a session of 2 hours. We have presential activities where people go to the streets and collect data, and also virtual, where we put the images of mapillaries, and we started to map in the missing data for the map. And so we also created some kind of a prize for who was able to map more. And you can see here the contributions. The ways the polygons were, and in the case of Bogota, was through my work in the university. The university has supported with the methodology. And due to the fact that Bogota is a much bigger city, more complex. And so we also had to diminish it to just to we also just focus on the definition of the pedestrian sidewalks, for example. And for example, we did the commerce and the hours of the commerce. We used open data from the official platforms of the Bogota district and the sequence of images from Mapillary that we have a lot. Fortunately, Bogota has a lot of information that we could work with. And finally, one thing that we could not work with that was due to the pandemic, the dynamics of the commerce has changed, what time the business were opening, what time this store was open. So it was not possible to map some of the points of the interests of the city, particularly to talk about key points of interest or the commerce in general. As a result, this is a small summary of our contribution. We did more or less 384 kilometers of sidewalks for pedestrians. This was presented in the conference of that you can consult in this page. The learning lessons is important. The involvement of local mappers, também the open street mappers to be available to be able to create a page of OpenStreetMap to put what we do, who we are, and our methodology. And also it's important to capacity building and auditing the work in the areas of transport that I consider that I work, and we have not implemented a lot on the mapping parties. And this is a very powerful tool that can help us to do more detailed studies that help us to understand and bring solution to the problems of the community. This is some of the challenges, the inequalities in the quality of the information. And you can see in the left, the mapping was focused in the areas of higher income. On the right, so you can see that there's no it doesn't so there's not information about the commerce of these areas, more the poorer areas. It doesn't mean that they don't have commerce. They do have their own commerces in the area. So we have to complement with the retail commerces of these small we have socialized to share more the possibility of the use of the open data that is in the university. This was a very fast presentation. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast, but thank you very much. If you have questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, that's good. You leave us some space for the questions. We're running a little bit late, but I believe it's so interesting that I feel really, really sorry to interrupt. So my apologies for everyone because I'm getting really excited about what I'm hearing. So with no long, so we're here finishing our first section of panelists with Rafael giving his presentations. And I would like to open for some few questions. Then we do a break and we go for a discussion where we have other three panelists that actually 3 other people that are going to discuss some points that we have seen today or other points that they have been working with. Okay, so let me see here. How can I check the questions? I don't know if Philip is here. If you can jump in and open your mic, Philip. I don't know if you're able to do that. And
Hi, Patricia. This is Dana.
Oh, hi, Dana.
So you're now the host. So if you click on attendees and you right-click Philip, you should be able to promote him to a panelist so he can join.
Yeah, that's something that I'm not sure how can I do that, but I think I can go to questions and answers.
Yep, Q&A will also have the open questions.
Oh,
okay. Do you want me to support you with reading some of these?
Yeah, if you can. I'm afraid of clicking and getting out.
Oh, okay. So Diego asked a question for Luis. For the follow-up activities, are they motivated from the researchers group, the institutions, community members, or a combination of them?
Ok, listo. Bueno, muchas gracias. Las actividades de seguimiento, una vez finalizó el proyecto.
Follow-up activities. They are done working with the universities, with the local observatories. So there are two ways. But the work of mapping and the geographic information depends more of the local actors. So the follow-up, we did the incorporation of this local element in the project. So in some of the communities that continues, for example, one of the participants in Cordoba, I believe that's one place that we could do a better follow-up of these activities. In this case of Cesar, he continued with the support of the academia. It's a very big geographic areas, but one of the municipalities was able to continue because they had incorporated these tools and was easy to do this management and lead workshops of mapping in their community. Other communities, como La Paz, and another one doesn't have the same history. So we have to do still the same work. This has to do with who was in charge of the project. For example, in the telling the stores, the people continue to work in the management of their conflicts and work in association with the observatory. This is a mixed work that I would say, the university and the community.
Thank you, Luis. I can see here there's another, we can reach the other questions. We have a question for Tasauf. With Team BH-Hot, I believe, as a model of considering the challenges you mentioned, what advice might they give to other community mappers regarding the community mapping process in interaction with outside actors, such as researchers, government authorities, etc., for mapping more empowering if the community decides to map their territory? Tasauf is there. You can answer this question, Tasauf.
Thank you, Philip, for the question. Actually, I would suggest more team-centric, coordinated, and organized approach, nurture leadership within the community, practice and innovate new ideas, and I would rather say rather focusing on the outside projects from other organizations. Rather, communities should try to build up their own project to map up their territories and what to, I would say, they should take control over the data within their territory so that they know which one to open up and which one have some sort of, I would say, some sort of closeness should be there, and which should be better for their own community itself. And the community consent should come through the, I would say, the community mappers out there. And if they have team and organized entities and approach out there, other researchers, government authorities, and others would love to have their thoughts and what their plans about mapping the areas and stuff like that, and how to run the projects. In those cases, they can put their input and advocate what sort of data and how much openness should be there, and this sort of thing will come on the play, and it will empower the community itself to be, I would rather say, have a leverage on the data itself. Thank you. Hope this clarifies.
Thank you, Tasauf. We have another question here that is more broad. I'm going to translate it and direct it to Monika. Monika, as your experience following projects in different countries, what would you say that there are legal marks that make this possible to stimulate or fragilize the responsible ethical use of community mapping? Have you seen, if I understood the question, if you know how this can be approached and how is a problem that you have seen in any of the experience that you followed?
If I understand the question correct, it's like, I think it's a crucial question, and we sort of, in the moment we are mapping, we are making decisions, and we might, and we are not fully, and in the moment we share the data, we are not fully control how the data will be later used. Will it be used in the benefit of communities? Will it be used against communities? I heard actually from like colleagues in discussion that also sometimes mapping products have been used, for example, to decide which areas to be evicted. And that's something which we are really fearing, that products which we have been producing in a way that we hope to bring the discussion of how to improve the quality of life on the general debate could be used against communities. And that's also why we are so much afraid of using this kind of exact boundary delineation, but saying we want to not showing this kind of slum, non-slum maps, because we don't want to be this data we produce being taken into something which we are not controlled. But on the other hand, you need to be aware that massive amount of data are produced. Like the example I show on this Microsoft Bing layer, there are other groups which are producing poverty maps. So there's a massive amount of people working with big data sets, Earth observation data sets, other spatial data sets, combining data, openly available data, running it through sophisticated models and algorithms, and disseminating outputs. There's also, for example, a data repository of which shows for many cities the sort of the slum boundaries. You can download this data, and it's also not stated from which moment of time are this data actually. Are they maybe 10 years ago? Are they now? And that's what we see. It's at least we don't want to have this either or production of data, slum, non-slum. We really we think that data need to be accompanied with clear guidance how to read this data, and also guidance about the data quality and about the limitations of data. And we need to much better sort of engage with community groups, that they are at least aware what data are produced about their communities. I think it's often not the case, that they can also access this data, validate this data, and oppose to this data. And I think that's also, as researcher, I see a big role in this sort of capacity development of communities in being able to read this massive amount of data produced on them. Good. I'm talking too long already. Handing over to you, Patricia. I'm not sure if I answered the question fully.
Yeah, I think it's a very hard question to answer. But yes, that's very important what you said. Very interesting. And I have two other questions. One for Rafael. Thank you, Monika. And Rafael said, to Rafael, which strategies were identified, if any, with the project to overcome the social economical disparities in mapping and data generation? Are you there, Rafael? Can you hear? I can't see you. I don't know if Rafael is hearing us. I have another question for Alexandre. I'm going to just make this other question. Alexandre,
he's hearing you, but I think he's in another channel. He just showed that.
Oh, he hears you. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to switch channel so I can hear what he's saying. Thank you.
I can't hear Rafael.
Yeah.
I don't hear Rafael, okay? Just so everybody knows.
Rafael, I think you need to join us in the original audio because I cannot hear you, and then the translation also cannot hear you in order to translate to other languages. Oh, there we go. I can see you and I can hear you too.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Should I answer in English or in Spanish? As you wish.
What do you feel more comfortable?
Both is okay, but okay, English this time. I think this challenge about data inequality based on the socioeconomical levels is a very huge challenge here in Colombia, and mostly because in these COVID times, it's really hard to go outside and map, and also we have some problems regarding with security. Therefore, I think it's important to link some of the experience we saw today in the conference, like involve communities and also involve other students with the mapping parties. And maybe we can use mapping parties with students to try to complement information based on their own surroundings on their homes. And yeah, therefore with the information from your own community, maybe you can try to deal a little bit with this gap. But it's really hard. First, because the city Bogota is so big, and we need a lot of people. And second, the COVID situation is making all the commerce places and a lot of points are changing daily. So it's really hard, but I think there are two strategies that could be useful in the future for complement the information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rafael. And a last question for Alexandre. Can you hear me, Alexandre? Maybe you need to join me in the original audio. Alexandre? Eu não. Aí, ótimo. Eu vou falar então em português. E para dar um tempinho para a tradutora também ir para o outro canal em inglês e outras pessoas nos entenderem. A pergunta, Alexandre, é sobre a questão ética de mapear favelas. Existe uma preocupação grande, né, de vários pesquisadores de outros lugares de mapear a comunidade da qual eles não fazem parte. Na sua opinião, nas comunidades que você trabalha, mapear, colocar em um mapa público informações sobre as vias, os edifícios, você acredita que isso é um problema? Vocês têm discutido isso? Gostaria de ouvir você falando sobre essa questão.
Um problema, né? Assim, o problema maior é a nossa acessibilidade e como a gente consegue adentrar nesses lugares nas comunidades, nas favelas. Como, por exemplo, tivemos trabalho...
The main problem then is how we enter these communities. We had to go into areas that were relatively dangerous. And if we didn't have a partnership with leadership, community leadership, it would be unfeasible because the whole planning and the communication about what was being done, why, how would that data be used? All of that was done by community leaders because there is real danger if you're taking pictures and you're registering and recording for people who live in those communities. If you're talking about security issues, if people feel a bit intimidated and suspicious, if you will. The population, from the standpoint of criminals, they interrogate us. Why are you taking these pictures? Why are you raising data? So the participation of community leaders was crucial. Actually, during this process, it was necessary to have drone images of the community. So we were actually asked, why are you filming such and such place? Why do you have drones flying here? So these are circumstances that do happen, and we need to have some emotional balance, because if you're frightened, you have to be there, you have to be in the company of a local resident and someone who may articulate this work with the community, because when we do this work, we at Dique do Cabrito, where we have an open sewage, it is an open area, and using drones and mapping all of this data, we had to explain that aside from a study it would be used to demand responsible measures. So being transparent is important because we need to make sure that you need to be honest. You need to say that you're going to use it for one thing and then the data is used for another goal may be a problem, and then the community might become unavailable to us next time because it happens already. People are, the communities are, there are adverse circumstances in which people are hopeless. When we come and we state that we are going to do research in households, they state, well, why are you coming here? Because the problem is not going to be solved. So the importance of us really bringing this transparency and inform what kind of work we are doing, that it's going to be some research so that people understand that it's nothing that is going to change life overnight, but these are data that is going to be analyzed and taken to the responsible bodies so that the problem may be solved. I hope I have addressed your questions.
Não, mas é isso também.
No, that's it. Thank you.
I think we all agree how important
Muito agradeço.
to have the community involved in the process. And more than that, we want to have the community leading the process. So I think that's why we thought of this webinar and this event. But thank you very much, Alexandre. Thank you, everyone. We are going to stop a little to give a break for the translators and for everyone to get some water and rest a little. And in 15 minutes, around 11:30, we'll be back with the final discussion and with some others. With some other people that are going to discuss, and we finish the event for today. Okay? You can stay in here. We're just going to mute and close our cameras, and we'll be here shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Courtney, are you here? Just like make sure that we have our presenters being able to speak.
Yes, I am here and ready to go.
Great. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for joining us. Just let me make sure that is Geoffrey here? Can you hear us, Geoffrey? And also Alice. Okay, Geoffrey, can you test your mic? Just make sure that we can hear you.
Hi, is that working?
Okay, Alice is here and it's fine. Great.
Geoffrey is
Alice.
an attendee instead of a panelist, so he needs to be given permission to talk.
Okay. Oh, he doesn't have mic control. Okay, let me see if I can switch this. Oops, I guess I just dropped Geoffrey. Oh man. Oh, I didn't know he had to. Philip, if you can hear me, give it a sign. Can you talk to Geoffrey? I switched him to speaker, but it looks like because of that he's out and he needs to get in again. Okay, good. But I believe we can get started, and whenever he gets in, he'll be already able to speak. So just 1 minute more. Yes, Geoffrey's here. And
Yes.
looks like you can speak. Great. Can we also see you?
It says the host has stopped my video.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, it can't allow me to start my video. I think you have to give
really?
access to that.
Let me see if there's something that I need to do. I don't know. But we can hear you.
Patricia?
Sorry about that. I don't know if it's a problem here because also people have also busy status, and I'm afraid I turn you to another. If you drop again, just come in again, okay?
Let me try that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still not allowing me to.
Yes, I believe now it's okay. Good. I can see you now. Yeah, I think we're all set then. For this next
Patricia?
we are thinking of a discussion of overview and based on your experiences. So feel free to leave your cameras open if you want to, but we do have the idea to have a few talks of some of the participants, which is first we'll have
Primeiro nós teremos
we have Courtney Clark from Everywhere She Maps and Youth Mappers in American Geography Society. And then we'll have Geoffrey Kataregga from Hot Community Manager, East Africa. He's based in Uganda, right, Geoffrey? And we have Alice Sverdlik from the International Institute for Environment and Development that is going to talk a little about this initiative that this group that is promoting this event is thinking of. So I think we can get started with Courtney.
Great, thank you, Patricia. I will go ahead and share my screen now. If there are any issues with that. So thank you so much for having me. As Patricia mentioned, my name is Courtney Clark, and about a month ago, I started a role as director of the Everywhere She Maps activity through Youth Mappers. And I also—
Just a second, Courtney. I think we have some echo. I don't know if everyone is muted. Just make sure that we can hear you well.
Okay. Great. Perfect. And then I'm also employed with the American Geographical Society, where I manage outreach to educators across the U.S. Who teach human geography classes to high schools and help them learn about OpenStreetMap. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio, and I've been part of the OpenStreetMap project since 2014. When I started getting involved with missing maps and humanitarian OpenStreetMap teams, mapathons for the Ebola epidemic in West Africa, because I had just completed living in Guinea for 2 years. So I want to talk today about how we can increase women's participation in OpenStreetMap and open mapping projects generally. I will say I kind of just learned about this opportunity in the last day. A male panelist who was invited was wanting to give voice to a woman and invited me to take his place, which is really amazing. Actually, Pete Masters, who's on this call, but I apologize if my slides are a bit rough since they're just been put together. Okay. So wanted to first take a look at, where are we today in terms of gender equality and OpenStreetMap? There is no real solid data about how many people who contribute to OpenStreetMap are women or men or other people of diverse genders. The OpenStreetMap website does not ask for users to inform of their gender when they are creating their OpenStreetMap account. So there's no way to tie a username to a gender, but we have other ways at kind of getting at this information, particularly through surveys. And many surveys have been done over the years, and experts estimate that only 2 to 5% of contributors to OpenStreetMap are women, which is really shocking and startling, but not always surprising if we dig deeper into the reasons. And I did want to share the results from a survey that was performed this year by the OSM Foundation. And the foundation is the nonprofit that kind of keeps the lights running on OpenStreetMap, pays for the servers and makes sure that there are programmers who are updating the editing tools, things like that. So of the survey respondents, 2,522 identified as male, only 232 identified as women, 44 people identified as non-binary gender, and 33 identified as other gender. This survey was very, very widely publicized and promoted. It was available in 18 languages. So for the most part, language barriers may not really explain this difference in gender. And the OSM Foundation board reached out individually to many women to encourage them to participate. So this survey was known about in the OpenStreetMap world for the most part, and we still only had a very, very small number of respondents who identified themselves as female, which is really disheartening. And so why is this? Well, there are a lot of really valid hypotheses and about why women don't participate in OpenStreetMap to the same degree as men. First, OpenStreetMap sometimes does not feel like, or is not in actuality, a safe space, especially a psychological safe space. And we'll dig into that a little bit further. But women have been claiming this for years, and often a minority of men in the OpenStreetMap community, but who have very loud voices, shut them down and say that it doesn't matter if OpenStreetMap is a safe space, it's just a map. We don't really care how you feel. It's generally the message that's given. And again, I want to emphasize that is not all men in OpenStreetMap, to be sure. There are many wonderful, wonderful men who participate. We also know that women perform the majority of unpaid domestic and care labor globally. They don't often have the time or the resources to participate in open mapping projects. We know that a lack of women and people of diverse genders in leadership positions can make it less appealing for women to get involved. In addition, women represent only slightly more than 35% of the world's STEM graduates. A lot of contributors to OpenStreetMap are first introduced to the project when they are university students. So the fact that there's such a lack of women in STEM programs, which is where they're most likely to be introduced to OpenStreetMap, is certainly a factor. And then we know, of course, that GIS and the cartography professions have historically been and continue to be male-dominated. So as I was putting together this talk, I wanted to pull from a really fantastic book called Data Feminism. I recommend you check it out. It's actually free online. There's a PDF version that you can access. And in the book, the authors put forth 7 principles of data feminism. I won't read them all, but the 2 I want to really think about today are examining and challenging power. So we're going to do that a little bit. I pulled some written comments that people who responded to the OSM Foundation survey had put at the end of their survey. There was a question in the survey about whether respondents supported the creation of a diversity and inclusion committee within the OpenStreetMap Foundation, and whether they supported exploration about whether a code of conduct should be in place through the OpenStreetMap Foundation. There is not currently a code of conduct within OpenStreetMap, though smaller organizations do have their own. These comments are really difficult to read, and I'll just be honest, I've never felt so unwelcome in the OpenStreetMap community as I was last night reading these comments, but I think it's really important to expose toxic things to sunlight, get them out in the air, because you can't address what you can't see. And it really just inspired me to double and triple down on work to better include women within OpenStreetMap. So I just want to warn you, a lot of these are pretty tough to read, but they're real, and they contribute to a toxic culture that feels unwelcoming to women within OpenStreetMap. So with that, someone commented that generally people who want to champion diversity within OpenStreetMap are just doing so to increase their own power and their own status. Someone so eloquently wrote, and I did not include the full swear word, F this equality nonsense. This commenter mentioned that diversity and inclusion is a slow and lethal cancer for any open source project, and that people who are pushing for diversity and inclusion and safe spaces within OpenStreetMap are just grievance activists who will destroy the project. This one is particularly difficult to read. This person says quite clearly, do not try to bring in more women or gay or colored people into OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is just about a map and technology, and there's nothing more to it. This person personally hates the idea of creating a diversity and inclusion committee. Even though only 2 to 5% of OpenStreetMap contributors are women, this person believes that there are no discriminatory factors or policies against women and minorities in the map. So I'll stop there, and I just want to make clear to everyone on the line that these people are in the minority. There were hundreds more comments that didn't include any language like this, but it does point to the fact that it's very challenging to create spaces that are both open and safe. And even a very small minority who speaks up and has a loud voice can create a very toxic and abusive culture that makes women and other minorities not want to participate in OpenStreetMap. And we know that psychological safety, in addition to physical safety, is incredibly important. Research has shown that you really can't achieve innovative performance, high performance in a project if the team members who are participating don't have psychological safety. We know that inclusion is necessary for mutual learning, which I think we all can agree is more important than ever in our volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And I just want to state to everyone on this line who watches the recording that you are welcome in OpenStreetMap, you are wanted, and you are needed. We also do have a lot of reasons to hope. These are just a few of the positive comments from the survey supporting the creation of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I'll let you just briefly scan those for a minute. And I want to talk briefly about a few stories of really inspiring women who are showing what is possible when we create safe spaces within OpenStreetMap and we promote diversity and inclusion. So one thing we know is that when women map, security improves. I have here a picture of Ingrid Martha Kintu from Uganda. She's a Youth Mapper student, and she uses remote sensing, GIS, and humanitarian mapping through OSM to assess the adequacy of health and water sites within refugee settlements in Uganda, as well as in informal settlements. And this mapping brings attention to policymakers and decision makers about where these sites are lacking adequate women's health, adequate sanitation, and adequate water. Another example of security improving is one of my favorite projects, Crowd to Map Tanzania. Since 2015, this organization has helped over 3,000 Tanzanian girls who did not want to participate in female genital mutilation. They've helped them to escape that process. So they train and mobilize volunteers across rural Tanzania to add to OpenStreetMap. They partner with grassroots organizations who run safe houses for people experiencing gender-based violence and FGM. And they also work with police, gender desks, and other rescue teams so that women and girls who call for assistance when they're experiencing gender-based violence can easily be found and navigated to by the police. We also know that innovation happens when women contribute to the map. Karen Martinez, another Youth Mappers participant, she helped create a very detailed map of her university in Panama. And a major goal and success of the project was helping people who had limited mobility better avoid broken sidewalks and find ramps for their wheelchairs. Through her perspective, they also prioritize mapping street lights, parking areas that are well lit so that women, university students who are there in the evening can feel safe going to their cars. And all of this work actually led to the development of an app that is now available for public use in Panama. We also know that lives are saved. So Maliha Binti, she is actually one of our Everywhere She Maps regional ambassadors. And she focuses on how mapping technology can be used to support and teach women in Bangladesh how to better navigate during situations of disaster caused by cyclones and flooding. And she organizes workshops to teach other women students how to do this, to lift up other women students. And we do know that there are safe spaces for women and girls in OSM where they're much more likely to participate. For example, within the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team projects, 28% of mappers identify as women. An estimated 40% of Youth Mappers students are women, and 25% of Youth Mappers chapters have more than 50% participation by women. These are numbers, of course, that we want to grow and achieve parity, but it's a good start, and it's much better than the global data. So what can we do? What do we know works to increase women's participation? First, we need to encourage, invite, and mentor women to participate. That's how I got involved. I wouldn't be where I am today without many, many mentors who kept inviting me to new opportunities. Make sure that all of our projects have an element of gender data analysis, amplify women's voices and stories, make sure that women are getting those leadership positions, create and enforce codes of conduct, map amenities and resources that are especially important to women and girls, and generally reduce barriers to women's and girls' participation. So I know I'm at my time, just wanted to quickly share my contact information and say thank you so much, and I look forward to the panel.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I'll just switch to Geoffrey.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let the slides share. Yeah, so thank you very much, Courtney, for your presentation. It was really interesting to see what is happening, especially around women issues in OpenStreetMap. So my name is Geoffrey Kataregga. I work with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team as the community manager for the Eastern and Southern Africa regional hub, based in Uganda. So in this short presentation, I just want to share some of my thoughts around community mapping, but also share some of the good stories around OpenStreetMap, community mapping using OpenStreetMap around Africa, and also a bit of how communities are organizing themselves to be able to do this community mapping.
Sorry, Geoffrey. Geoffrey, can you just speak closer to the mic? I think it's a little low, your voice. Make sure everyone
is that
understands
better?
you. A lot better. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so like I was mentioning, yeah, community mapping and general mapping with OpenStreetMap is all about communities putting themselves on the map. It's mapping which is done by the community and for the community. OpenStreetMap being an open platform that anyone can really contribute to, gives different communities that opportunity to be able to choose what to put to the map, because different places all over the world, they face like different challenges. So it's very important for them to choose what to map, and that way they can really address the local challenges they face using this open data platform. And one of the good ways that they're using this is also to advocate for resources, because by mapping what is on ground, they are able to show what is where and what is missing, and they can use that evidence-based kind of information to advocate for more resources. And doing this, collaboration is key with the different players. So when people do the mapping and collaborate with other organizations like government, like aid agencies, then it helps to really make sure that the outcomes of open mapping and community mapping can really help solve the challenges they face. So I'd like to share a few insights from a survey we did at OpenStreetMap Africa. OpenStreetMap Africa is a network of OSM communities from all over Africa. And when you look at the density of mapping across Africa, it shows you like a little bit of where the active communities are in terms of like contribution to OpenStreetMap. So these statistics just show which ones are like the most densely mapped places in regards to the number of buildings. But also when you look into the structure of OpenStreetMap communities, so to be able to do community mapping, communities need to organize themselves and come together, organize events like mapathons, mapping parties, meetups, and in doing so, they're able to do more. So some of them have a membership structure where it differs from country to country. So some people, believe the majority, like anyone who contributes to OpenStreetMap in their country is a member of the OSM community in that country. Some have like a membership fee that also helps them organize different things like events and activities, whereas others define membership as people who participate in events. Anyone who comes to an event is a member. This shows how frequent these different groups meet. So these results again are from a survey we did with all the different OSM communities in Africa. So 46% of them have not had meetups in a long time. 8% meet every week, 17% meet every month, twice every month, that is 2.7%. And there is like a 24% which have not had any meetups so far. And these are groups where, these are in countries where there is no active OpenStreetMap community. They use different channels to communicate. Majority of them use WhatsApp and Facebook. They also have mailing lists, Telegram, and also some of them have websites like to communicate about their work with the wider OSM community. So 33% of the communities have a website and 66% don't have one. These are the forums they use to communicate. And when it comes to leadership structures, these different groups, like 45% have some kind of a leadership structure and 55% don't have. So for those that have a leadership structure, they have like a national coordinator, some have like an NGO structure, some have a national association, some have just someone leading the community and different people sharing roles. And many of them are actually just youth mappers chapters, and they use their leadership structure for their youth mappers club as their leadership structure. I'd also like to give a few examples of some projects, a few projects across Africa that have done community mapping for particular try to solve local challenges. So one of them that is really done a lot of work is in Tanzania, a project called Ramani Korea, where they have mapped the whole city, Dar es Salaam, which is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa, for flood resilience, because the city faces a lot of challenges around flooding. One key thing that is in their methodology when they're doing mapping is doing community forums, and also pairing local community members with university students who are doing their internship programs. And this is a very good model of community mapping, because when you come to tools like OpenStreetMap, you may find like local people who are staying in these places. They don't have the technical skills on how to do mapping. using these open source tools. But then you bring in students who are like doing their internship and are studying geography, and they're able, to move around, collect data, and then put it in OpenStreetMap, open it up for everyone to use. And the community forums they have at the beginning of their project, of their mapping, really helps to engage the local community and find what is the mapping for, what is the data going to be used for, what are things are important for them as well to add to the map. Because one of the challenge is in some of these informal settlements, if you go and do data collection, you do community mapping, some people get worried that they're going to be evicted, like it was also mentioned in the previous session. And one of the ways to counteract that is to really involve, engage the community, have a meeting, explain the purpose of the mapping and how it can help them. Another good project I'd like to give as an example is in Mauritania. So the OpenStreetMap community there have produced the first interactive public transport map of their city, and this information is freely available online, but it's really a very good example of community mapping. So, local citizens in this city grabbing these digital tools and creating this wonderful data. Courtney has already given this good example from Tanzania by Crowd2Map. And one key thing they're doing in their project is also they have digital champions. So women that they have given a mobile device, a smartphone in each of the villages in Serengeti district, around 78 villages. And there is a woman in each village with a mobile phone who does community mapping. So adding facilities from her village to the map, but also using this smartphone to report gender-based violence cases to police through Open Data Kit, which is a very good example, a combination of, community mapping, but also using digital tools to respond to the issues that communities are facing on ground. The last example I want to give is the community mapping for refugees in Uganda project that we did with the refugees from South Sudan, from DRC, who are living in Uganda. So Uganda hosts over 1 million refugees. And in these places, always resources are scanty because Uganda's refugee policy is they have what we call refugee settlements, where refugees are settled within communities. So you find like resources like water, schools are shared with the refugees that come in, and that usually puts the scanty resources at a minimum. So through mapping, working with the refugees and the local community members, we're able to move around these refugee settlements and map water points, health facilities, education facilities, and sharing this data with government, with UNHCR, and using this data to, to respond to cover the gaps in terms of resource allocation, which is a very good example of, through community mapping, people are empowered to collect and share information with authorities to advocate for resources that they miss. Thank you. I'll have to really stop there, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. We still have Alice to talk. We're here in our time that we're supposed to finish. I was wondering if Rachel and Raquel and Paula will be able to be with us another 15 or 20 minutes, so other people can still understand the English, the talking English. But if not, we totally understand, and I'll already let people know that if you're in the Spanish channel or in the Portuguese channel, you want to follow the following conversation in English. If both of them needs to leave, you are welcome to join us here in the English talk. But Alice, go ahead. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Raquel. Also, thank you, Geoffrey, for your talk.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and for your patience. I really appreciate the chance to join you. I'm a researcher at the International Institute for Environment and Development, which is a policy institute that works with urban poor communities and policymakers to try to foster more inclusive urbanization. And most of my work has been in Kenya, as I'll explain, and I know that we've had some wonderful presenters already from East Africa, so I can't do justice to their work, but I'll try to explain some past projects and some future areas of research that I hope might be relevant. Just to start, I'll briefly discuss the multiple risks and exclusions in informal settlements that are often poorly captured in past research. I'll look at some mixed methods findings on food vendors and sanitation in informal settlements in Nairobi. I'll reflect a bit on contributions of community-led data, which I think resonate with a lot of things we've heard already today, and briefly sketch some future areas of research. As I'm sure you're aware, residents of informal settlements often face several risks at the same time, linked to low quality housing, hazardous local environments, tenure insecurity, poor infrastructure and services, disasters and climate change, among many other challenges. They may face socioeconomic divides, gender inequality, and political marginalization. And within informal settlements, as we've been hearing, there may be particularly vulnerable groups like refugees, migrants, people with disabilities. And of course, there's a lack of data on these unrecognized settlements, but as we know, many community-led data collection processes are helping to fill these gaps. In just a couple snapshots, I wanted to discuss a project from a few years back that I was part of in Nairobi's informal settlements, where we were looking at food vendors who are often studied in main markets or central districts of a city, but there's very little information on traders that sell to other residents of informal settlements. So in a partnership with Kenya's Slum Dweller Federation, known as Muungano wa Wanavijiji, and its support NGOs, we helped to map informal vendors using baseline maps and Kobo Collect, as well as conducting focus groups that explored vendors' environmental challenges and their contributions. And it was clear from speaking and mapping hundreds of vendors how they provide affordable foods in convenient locations, often throughout the day. So providing an affordable access to food that also created livelihoods. Just to give you a sense of the many different types of food vendors, some are mobile, as you see in the picture here, some are stationary, some have more permanent structures than others, but in many cases they would sell alongside uncollected solid waste or in areas that were prone to flooding, very poor street paths. So these created additional challenges and food safety risks that we explored. As far as the maps go, I can only just give a brief overview, but this is one of the informal settlements called Korogocho, which, as you can see, there are hundreds of vendors, often near the main roads or footpaths, only sometimes having access to water, which would make it quite difficult to keep, say, vegetables clean. They also face challenges of highly insecure settlements. So you can see on the right that it was difficult to sell in some of these more insecure areas, or vendors might face challenges at night if they were selling in these spots. We tried to capture these array of challenges spatially and also through focus groups. Just in this, we see one of the food vendors selling fresh produce, and it was really common for women to predominate in food vending, especially in cooked foods and fresh vegetables. So it's another sign of the importance of a gender lens, as we've been discussing today. And in particular, it was often women that used food vending in their settlements to combine their care work and family responsibilities with their paid work. So in the quote on the right, one of the food vendors was noting that she's able to prepare her kids for school and then start selling. They can find her home when they come back for lunch. She finds it much easier to balance her duties at home and at work by having this livelihood. So it's a reminder of how informal settlements don't just provide housing, but they're also a source of livelihoods and vibrant economic activity. I just want to turn briefly to other data from Slum Dwellers International, which I'm sure many of you are aware is a network of community-based organizations active in 32 countries. It was founded in 1996 and has advocated at the municipal, regional, and global levels for more inclusive cities. And a key strength of SDI is data collection. as I'll briefly discuss some of their methods, but again, I know many other people have discussed this more, and I'd encourage you to learn more about it if you're interested. The typical sequence for a community-led enumeration in informal settlements would begin with a community-wide meeting to discuss how data will be collected. There are local enumerators from the community that would be trained and supported. Enumerations would typically take place at a house-to-house level, including interviews and mapping of key features and infrastructure. And then most, very crucially, there's verification at the end to ensure that each household across the settlement can verify and ensure that local ownership and priorities are identified. So just briefly to show what this looks like, this is in Kisumu in Western Kenya, where an enumerator is beginning with a house number, which is also recorded on a community map. A whole team will compile and quality check the findings, and then the maps and socioeconomic data will be displayed in a central place so that residents can come and verify these findings. Just to note that over the years, SDI has often gained in scale and ambition. So the Kenyan Federation has been able to move from the settlement level to the zonal or city level. They've undertaken data collection with county governments, particularly to support regularization of land and shelter. There have been profiles of all slums in several counties, including Nairobi. So it's a reminder of just the enormous wealth of data that have been gathered by residents. And these findings can often reveal multiple risks and bring attention to settlements who've been otherwise left off the map, and provide the foundation for partnerships with local government, utilities, and donor agencies. Given the fact that these are locally owned, there's an important chance to foster community empowerment, and particularly as it's women that predominate in community groups that are part of SDI, there's a chance to foster gender equality as women gain in competence and greater public recognition. In turn, there are also chances to support locally appropriate interventions that foster inclusion and well-being. And as Monika noted, residents of informal settlements are also using their data to tell their own stories, such as short videos and podcasts and other ways to get their voices out. And I guess I should mention briefly that there is already an enormous amount of data used gathering, using a profiling tool that's quite consistent across SDI. So they're able to compare findings in multiple cities and across a city. But sometimes past studies haven't been able to capture issues around quality of service provision and infrastructure. So during my PhD research, I'm trained as a city planner. I admit I don't do much in the way of spatial data, but I tried as part of my research in an informal settlement called Mukuru to understand what's called the sanitation chain, the idea of how wastes are disposed from containment to end use, and what that would look like in an informal settlement where many people don't have access to sewers or to other safe methods of disposing of their waste. So as part of this project during my PhD, I worked with residents to explore how wastes are disposed in informal settlement with really poor sanitation provision. And so we used a map that the Slum Dweller Federation had kindly prepared that had sewer lines and the sites of various sanitation options, but we wanted to mark up where people actually dispose their waste, where the sewers are blocked, is there open defecation, and we also explored in a focus group what are the causes of non-functional sanitation, which could be due to poor management, blocked sewers, insecurity, sinking water tables. This is one of many of the qualitative findings that we tried to explore alongside the spatial data. And just to give you a little bit more on what we found, it really, sanitation provision really varied by location, by residents' age, by season. So sometimes people would flood out their latrines during the rainy season. I can't do justice to this right now, but I wanted to show how it's important to get a more nuanced understanding of sanitation, both through spatial data and some of these qualitative findings. And just turning to a few other future directions of research that I would love to take forward, especially if this is of interest to any of you, please do let me know. I think there's important opportunities to do mixed methods research into the multiple risks and emerging opportunities in informal settlements. This might include additional qualitative and spatial data on the impacts of unreliable or hazardous infrastructure and shelter. As I've been discussing, there's a need to understand sanitation through spatial data, through seasonal variations, and also to understand more generally the impacts of inadequate service provision. How do residents also cope with extreme weather and small or everyday disasters that may not qualify as a major event, but can really take a toll in informal settlements? And more positively, what are the contributions, assets, and emerging opportunities in informal settlements, including the vibrant livelihoods like food vending and other creative responses, including during COVID, that have played such a crucial role in maintaining well-being in these areas. And methodologically speaking, I think there are important opportunities to develop replicable data collection methods that are relevant and feasible for community organizations, ways of combining data sources and analyzing the needs of particularly vulnerable groups that may include refugees or people with disabilities. Love to talk further about this, but I know we're short on time, so I'll just close here. My organization publishes a journal called Environment and Urbanization, which has quite a lot of information on how SDI have gathered data and some other discussions that I hope would be relevant. Thanks very much for this opportunity, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Alice. Not so sure if I could be able to open my video again. I think that's not the problem here, but that's okay. I hope you can hear me. Yes, okay, good. So let me see if we have questions. Not so sure if we have questions for this section. I think everyone is hungry, at least here in Brazil. It's already 12, so people is already hungry. I don't know if Philip can help me out here posting some questions that might came out somewhere. But okay, I just like give back to you three as a discussion panel. Also, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the experiences that you have. For example, when you're talking, well, there's so many things that we have talked since the beginning. If Geoffrey and Courtney could come back, open their...
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, good. Can see you too. So yeah, about all these experiences, we also have, you added, Courtney, something very important, which is the role of the women in this mapping process. And especially if we're talking more sooner about the COVID crisis and the violence and all this, the home violence that women are having to. So I don't know, how can we, it's difficult for us to think, how can we map this and being open? There's always this paradox, and be safe, you know, and it comes to the original problem of ethics. And if you or any other the participants can give us a little bit to talk about how can we map violence and not making this danger for the people that is mapping it, or from the communities. That is something that I'm really always worried about when I work with people from the community. I don't want to expose them to something that Alexandres spoke very well in his talk. And when you come to the women problems, it also comes and has a lot to do. So I want to hear a little bit about that, and while we can have maybe other questions.
Thank you, Patricia. I can start off. It's a really good point that you raised. And I think Crowd to Map Tanzania has really built the model for how this work can and should be done in a way that ensures the security of women and girls. So I would not recommend that anyone just go in on their own and start, mapping away at adding data about shelters or safe spaces, safe houses that people experiencing gender-based violence can go to. It's really, really, really critical that you work in collaboration with the organizations who run those safe houses and follow their preferences. I know that Hope for Girls and Women in Tanzania, they do want these safe houses that they run to be on the map. They have adequate security. It's more important for them that women and girls can find these safe houses. They know that other people, perhaps perpetrators of violence, could also find them on the map, but they have the security in place at the safe houses so they feel comfortable having those mapped. But those are conversations that you have to have with and in partnership with the organizations. Same with the police. That's here in America, as I'm sure everyone knows, we have a lot of issues with corruption in the police, a lot of mistrust with police. But Proud to Map has built really positive relationships with the police gender desks in rural Tanzania, and there is that level of trust there so that they do feel comfortable for women and girls to share their information and their location data with the police. But again, that depends on local context. So those are all things that I would consider, and stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Yeah, that's very important to highlight. And I don't know if Geoffrey want to talk a little bit more or ask any questions.
What to map and what not to map, because they are the ones that live in these places. And I think what happens in most cases, you find like the person who designs like the survey that's going to be made is someone who is not from the place. And if you don't really consult with the people who live in those areas, so that at the end of it all, the data that is collected is also useful for them, not only for other people. So I think it should be two ways. If you're going to do community mapping and have like a community participation, it's also crucial that the data that is collected is also beneficial for them. And when it comes to the risks that are involved, still I think they're the first people to say, okay, this is too risky if we put it on an open map. So they're the ones to make that decision, and if they're not really comfortable with that, then they will let you know, like they will openly say that like, for example, for OpenStreetMap, of course, we don't like put like personal information on the map, but if you're going to go and collect data, sometimes that is not really clear. So it's also good to make the intentions clear, like, okay, when we collect this kind of data, this is what we are going to add to the map, and this is what we shall leave this out, so that it's clear what is at risk, and even to remove issues around, worries, who is having access to this data, and how are they going to use it? Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Geoffrey. If Alice wanna give us her final thoughts also, or her view.
I guess just more broadly, it underscores the importance of how data will be used and how to make it useful for communities, I guess, and maybe different formats for sharing data that can go with that. I guess that's another, don't want to open up a whole other discussion, but it reminds us that the uses of data and making sure it is truly accessible and useful for communities and all the diversity of communities that would involve, or something that we can all think further about. Not taking that for granted and recognizing that's going to vary by location, but certainly really useful to bear in mind, I think.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're really passed by the time of the entire event, but we had so many interesting talks and points that came here. They were brought not only today, but since the beginning. I was making yesterday some statistics on the event from starting on March 6th. We have more than 180 people registering for participating sum of activities, and we don't have like any. We did it all by ourselves, and we might publicize around the people that we already know. But I think it's already interesting to know this interest. We're not thinking only about OpenStreetMap, but we recognize how important OpenStreetMap, the role OpenStreetMap plays in here. So we're very glad to have people from HOT and talking about how we can use this platform. But there are other needs when it comes to working with communities. We're thinking about, there were people from more than 23 different countries participating, also registering. So we thought it was also a topic that needs to be addressed, and it touches the reality of many different people. And of course, language is a barrier. So that's why we thank so much for having our translators here and be able to do this. We're thinking as groups that we're talking about this, from ITZ in Netherlands and group from Warwick in England, to put this together and build up, right, this idea, this knowledge. So we'll be very pleased to have anyone that is here, that is listening to us, sending us email, any ideas of how can we make this possible? How can we move forward, address these problems, and use the tools not to exclude, but to include them, to make these more available, because we're doing community participation as planners, urban planners, and Alice is here showed, and everyone showed here many possibilities. We've been doing this for a long time, but we now have other possibilities that can be used in the other direction, or we can use them in our favor. And when I say our favor, is the favor in favor of the communities that we are mapping, because at the end, that's who we want to make the lives improve. And there are so many problems. I think there was very broad aspects of how all of that can help. And I was very glad to be part of it, to listen and hear and understand, try to understand and learn with you all. So thank you all very much for being here to join. Sorry for, sometimes I could not interrupt because it was very difficult and it was very interesting. So it is for sure a need to hear more about all these experiences, and we will be very glad to keep this project going, and very glad to hear what are your ideas of making this happen. So thank you again for everyone. Thank you all teams and people that are in this group organizing the event. And Philip, Dana, Anna, and Alice that is here, Monika, and other Professor João, and everyone from Youth Mappers, also from Brazil, the students that help us with the communication, they are here too. And yeah, well, there's probably a lot more people to thank. Sorry for not mentioning you, but it's very nice to have everyone here. And yes, I guess that's it. We can now say goodbye, and hopefully we can keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.